Hi, my name is Tiffany Sensel, and today I'm going to be presenting Gifted Professional Development Characteristics of Gifted Students. Our goal is to grow in knowledge and comfort with teaching gifted students, and this was done as a project for Malone University. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is get a pre-assessment. If you haven't had a chance to already do this, you can scan this QR code over here, or you can click on the link. It will take you to a pre-assessment Google form with a couple questions. This is what that Google form looks like. The questions are, how many students do you teach daily that have a gifted identification? What is your knowledge level on gifted students? Minimal up to expert. What is your comfort level with teaching gifted students in your subject? Not comfortable, extremely comfortable. What accommodations do you make for gifted students, or would you like to do? What would you like to learn more about and or work on regarding gifted education? You may check all that apply here. There's differentiating, tiering, social emotional assessments, gifted index, and compacting. And then there's a spot for you to type other stuff if there is something else. And then finally, are there gifted education resources you would like or suggest that would make providing the best education easier? When you're finished with that pre-assessment, I would like you to, on a Post-it note, write down what is your definition of giftedness, or what comes to mind, just a word or a phrase on a Post-it note. So when I did this with the staff, I organized them into 4 different categories of the responses I got. I got a couple of them that were students who need an additional push to grow, or they may become bored or need challenged. Here's another group of them. These are all about perfectionism. They have challenges. They're not always an A student, perfectionist, and then twice exceptional. And then another category was about thinking differently. These ones, I got think differently, outside of the box thinking, different way of thinking, challenging to keep engaged, thinks outside the box, thinks differently, out of the box, and different. And then the last group is, most of these ones all said talented or smart. So we got talented, exceptional in a certain area of life, quick learner, talented, thorough, do some work, higher achieving on test scores, smart, excelled, extra, and smart. Okay, so those are all the words that the staff came up with. And I'm going to go ahead and click on to the next slide here. And on this one, this gives you a definition that I made up as a visual for what gifted students means. My definition was they are capable of performing at a level much higher than their peers in an area that their community values. And the gifted experts all disagree about what their definition is for gifted. So that's why I have my own definition. The community values part of that is because in our community, in our area, we value math and science and social studies, ELA, arts, visual arts, those types of things. But if we lived somewhere different, those might not be the things that our society would consider gifted. For example, like if we were cavemen, those areas wouldn't be so valuable. So on the top here in pink, I have the different ways you can be gifted. Specific academic ability, that's like if you're in math, science, social studies, ELA. Superior cog may be identified by individual or group IQ test or by national normed achievement test. I explained that one as just you have a high processing speed in your brain. Your brain just works really well. So superior cog is, you're just able to learn pretty much anything. Creative thinking ability may be identified by an approved creativity test or checklist or behaviors. That one can also include, in addition to drawing and painting and the arts in that way, it can also be creative writing. Visual or performing arts ability may be identified by just demonstrating performance ability and exhibiting an approved checklist of behaviors. And then down at the bottom in blue, there are different characteristics that gifted students may have. They may have extreme interests that last for years. They may have one or more area of giftedness. They may struggle in some areas. They tend to be comfortable with abstract thinking. They may have a need for social justice. They can become totally absorbed or lose track of time and place. And they typically have an IQ greater than 130. For this professional development, it is a 3-part series. Put this over here. This is the first one on characteristics and traits of gifted students and how can you help them. The next one is on assessments and ways to provide gifted services, differentiated tiering, compacting in your lessons. And then the last one is about accommodations that you can do and the WEPs and the WAPs. So what the staff said in the survey about what they would like to learn regarding gifted education, tiering was at 61%. Then differentiating was the next one. And then about assessments, social emotional, and then finally gifted index and compacting. So some characteristics that gifted students are more prone to exhibit. And remember, all generalizations have exceptions. So this doesn't mean that all gifted kids have all of these. These are just characteristics that are more likely to occur in gifted students, not necessarily, every child is different. So these are just ones that, you want to be on the lookout for and have a plan for how to help them. So the first one is asynchronous development. And that is, they have an intellectual, physical, or emotional ability that does not develop at the same rate. So for example, a child could display a developmental profile of intellectual ability. They would be like the smartness of age 6. Physical ability, though, like sports and athletics, would be age 3, and their emotional maturity is age 2. A lot of times with gifted students, this is very typical that you'll get an emotional maturity that is much lower than their intellectual ability. And so that is one thing that we need to work on, having strategies to help the gifted students. They also could have difficulty with peer relationships. Positive coping strategies equal a higher self-concept. Negative coping strategies equal a lower self-concept. By helping them choose positive coping strategies, we're also helping them improve their social relationships. Typical coping strategies include hide their giftedness, deny their giftedness, conform to peer exceptions, they value peer acceptance, minimizing the importance of popularity, use humor, and helping others. Males are most likely to use humor and minimize the importance of popularity. For that one, I kind of think of, it's very typical to have the smart kid sitting in the back of the room cracking jokes. And then for females, they're more likely to use pro-social behavior like helping others or denying their giftedness to fit in. Perfectionism is another characteristic that gifted students display sometimes. It's the fear of failure and the need for approval to feel good about oneself. In the upper grades, perfectionism becomes harder to identify since it may look more like procrastination. I noticed this a lot in the high school math classroom. Typically, there will be some kids, a lot of times it is boys, that refuse to do any work. They won't turn in any homework. And it's sometimes a perfectionism issue that they would rather have just not done the work than have done it and gotten some things wrong. So that's something to watch out for and be aware of and have some strategies of how you can help. So one of the ways we can help is to avoid the phrase, always do your very best. The reason you want to avoid that is because that implies that they have to perform a certain way in order to get approval. So you want to commend their effort and their hard work over just their intelligence and grades. Shifts the emphasis from the product to the learning process. So I'd like to Pause for a minute, and I want you to think of ways that perfectionism can also be a good characteristic, and then share your ideas with someone next to you. Okay, so all of these characteristics can be a good thing. Like the perfectionism can be a good trait at certain times. The idea with helping the gifted students with it is just giving them strategies whenever it is hurting them more than it is helping them. So some of the answers that I got from the staff was when safety is an issue, we would like them to be perfectionists then. Medical, get it right the first time. Like they mentioned in surgery, that would be a good time to be a perfectionist. You don't want to do surgery on the wrong leg, was one of the comments we got. Life and death situations like a doctor. So they were saying the same thing there. Driving, we don't want to have any accidents. And in the kitchen, that's one that I wouldn't have thought of. And the group that came up with that one was talking about baking and that you have to be very precise whenever you're baking. Underachievement is when there's a discrepancy between a student's performance in school, some index of that student's ability. Some causes of underachievement can be how they view themselves academically, a dislike of the school, teacher, or subject, lack of motivation and or self-regulation, and they don't see the value in the goals. How we can help with the underachievement is provide a non-threatening, flexible, and respectful classroom environment. Encourage students to pursue their interest, provide opportunities for various learning styles, provide short-term or long-term tutoring depending on the needs if they are behind. The next characteristic is overexcitabilities. The first one is psychomotor. They have a surplus of energy, almost never tire out, constantly in motion, fidgeting, impulsive, need for action, intense drive. They can work for long hours without tiring as adults. Sometimes this one gets mistaken for ADHD. The next one on the right here is sensual overexcitabilities. They have a heightened awareness of all five senses. They are processing all this information that comes in really, really fast. And that can be a good thing. That's why they're able to process things so fast and they're able to learn so quickly. But if it's bothering them, like a smell or a taste or texture, something that is bothering them with their senses, then that can get in the way of their learning and of just general life for them. A lot of times they will have sensitivity to food smells, taste, and textures. They will have tactile sensitivity, like touching things. That would be whenever people like need to have the tags cut out of their clothing or the seams are bothering them. Heightened appreciation of beauty in all of its forms, like art, nature, objects, and things like jewelry. On the left is imaginational overexcitabilities. This would be daydreaming, very vivid daydreams, fear of the unknown, love of poetry, music, and drama, love of fantasy, and magical thinking. Intellectual overexcitabilities, they have a deep curiosity. They go down rabbit holes and just learn tons and tons of information, like the little boy that's always obsessed with dinosaurs, and not just like they like to play with them, but they've researched them and read about them and really have a serious curiosity. They are analytical, theoretical, and independent thinking. They are avid readers and they love knowledge. Emotional overexcitabilities can have depression, anxiety, timidity, and shyness. They have a heightened sense of right and wrong. They have a need for justice. This extremes of emotion, problems adjusting to change, and feelings of inadequacy and inferiority. Excitability, how we can help it. So this is the definition just again over here on the right, how we can help the excitabilities. Explain them to the parents and students and explain them in a way that you know that they are positive as well as they can be hindering to the student. Emphasize that it's okay, it's normal, they're understood, they're accepted. These are normal things for gifted students, and really lots of students have these characteristics. Teach them some coping strategies for their responses. Just because something's bothering you, you can separate that from your response from it. So just teaching how to do that. Teach nonverbal and verbal communication strategies. Limit your exposure to overstimulating activities. Provide safe ways to express anger and raise awareness of one's behaviors and their impact on others. Some similarities and differences between ADHD and gifted behavior. A lot of times these get misdiagnosed. So in ADHD, it's poorly sustained attention in almost all situations. They are trying to focus and they cannot. Diminished persistence on tasks, not having immediate gratification, impulsivity, poor ability to delay gratification, impaired adherence to commands to regulate or inhibit behavior in social contexts, more active and restless than normal children, and difficulty adhering to rules and regulations. On the gifted end, there's poor attention, boredom, daydreaming in specific situations. So they can focus whenever they want to or they're interested. They have a low tolerance for persistence on tasks that seem irrelevant. Their judgment lags behind their intellect. Their intensity may lead to power struggles with authorities. They have high activity level and they may need less sleep if they have the psychomotor overexcitabilities. Questions, rules, customs, and traditions. So those were the characteristics we talked about: asynchronous, difficulty with peers, perfectionism, underachievement, and excitabilities. Next, I'd like you to think of an example of a time that you have seen any of those characteristics displayed in the classroom. So a lot of times in the classroom, I'll see the asynchronous development. Students will be very gifted in math. They will come into Algebra 2 capable of doing many very difficult problems and asking very high-level questions that you can tell they're really thinking, they're understanding everything. But then you'll see them have a complete meltdown over the smallest thing that you wouldn't think they should have a meltdown over. And that's because their emotional age is not as high as their mathematic education age. So they're not able to self-regulate. As a post-assessment on your level of gifted students, what is your knowledge level of gifted students? 1, minimal knowledge, no experience, and 10, expert on gifted. The next session, we're going to work on ways to tier, differentiate, and compact.